Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm live, and this is Kenny Lee Lewis. Here we go.
Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Yeah, baby! Fly like an eagle! Mr. Kenny Lee Lewis on the guitar, Gordy Knudsen on the drums, Bill Peterson on the bass, Norton Buffalo on the congos and vocals, Joseph Wooten on the keyboards and vocals, and San Francisco's own Joe Satriani on the guitar.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
That was a wild night.
You're famous, man.
Well, yeah, you
Well.
shut it all up. It's all got to go start playing.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Kenny Lee Lewis. Now, he's not my standard jazz fare. However, he did tell me he has recorded jazz.
Yeah,
And
I have a jazz album out that's been out for quite a few years, but we'll find some selections later on.
yeah, we will. And I mean, it sounds like to me that you are you're a guitar player, you're a bass player, as we were saying before, equally versed at both of those, and also a writer, right?
Both of songs and books.
Excellent. Yeah, and he's actually. We'll talk more about it afterwards. But he's also written a trilogy, which to me that's very impressive. I mean, it's enough getting together writing a book, but a trilogy. That's. Do you see yourself writing more? A lot like in that on that kind of.
Well,
area?
I'd like to dovetail, from my performance music concert business that I'm in into coming up here to the mountains and getting away from it all and just becoming a novelist. I would love to do that in the autumn of my years, and it's just something that appeals to me. I mean, I still enjoy going out and playing. We just played Summerfest 2 nights in a row the other night and burned it up and played for 10,000 people, and it was fun, and I got paid. And what's not to love, But bouncing around on the tour bus in the middle of the night on bad roads is not my idea of fun at the age I'm approaching. So as far as Steve goes, I mean, this is his catalog. I mean, we support his catalog, so he's going to be stuck with that catalog until he's, making his transition. So we'll help him promote that catalog for as long as we can.
Yeah.
But like I say, I'd love to dovetail into becoming a literary writer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. I was going to ask you something. Toby Simmons is here, and she wants to know if it's snowing. It looks like snow in the background, but I don't
No,
think.
it's just real bright.
Yeah.
See, Toby, if I go like this, it changes. It's just real bright outside, and this camera's not picking it up well. And I got like a light bulb on my face so you can see who I am. I'm in the patio. I just thought it would be a nice backdrop. If I turned it around, it would probably be better. But
How's the temperature?
oh, it's beautiful. Oh my gosh, it's just gorgeous. It was actually frosting and still snowing here like not but a week ago.
Oh,
So this is the break of the summer right here, and
wow.
it's just gorgeous. A breeze coming in up off the meadow here, and I mean it's absolutely lovely. I'd say it's about
Really,
68 degrees.
it's really nice that you can have a place to actually escape to that you can write. It is very distracting being
Yeah,
at home, no matter how you try and work it out.
yeah, yeah. We don't have cell service here, but with the Wi-Fi on, people can call me on the phone, and it kind of goes through. Sometimes, of course, Facebook works, but I mean, like Diane, calls me the other morning, goes, the microwave blew up. And I'm like going, okay, I'm trying to write here, it's like if I didn't have that communication, it would be like I'd be burning and not caring about the microwave. But, there's responsibilities at home and I have to be in touch. So,
Yeah. And and I had interviewed uh, your wife, Diane.
yes,
It's Steinberg Lewis, right? Diane
correct.
Steinberg Lewis.
Yeah.
That was a fun interview too. She's got a very interesting
Oh,
history.
yeah. I mean, her family's history is ridiculous. And I've also written a treatment for kind of a movie documentary on that family called "It's
Wow.
All Green," and it all involves, the early days of swing music going into boogie woogie, which eventually became rock and roll in Memphis. And she was there for all that. And of course, Elvis came later, and it was like Stax was there, and her family was there for almost every one of those moments in time that were kind of like milestones in American music history. And it's just an unbelievably rich history with her family. But a lot of people don't know the Steinbergs or even the Newborns. As a matter of fact, you might have heard of Finest Newborn Jr., one
Yeah.
of the piano players. Well,
Yeah.
he was her father's piano player, and they grew up together. So they were all together. They were all heavy jazz cats. And when rock came, and they just had to kind of adapt, sort of like we did with disco, we just did it to make the money, and then it went away. They thought it was going to go away. Well, unfortunately for them, rock and roll didn't go away. Unfortunately for me, it stayed for like 65 years so far.
Wasn't it her mom who was the DJ, the
Yeah,
special?
Martha Jean the Queen Steinberg was one of the first Black female DJs in America on WDIA in Memphis, and broke all the
That was
race back,
quite the story,
and all
man.
the stuff.
Wow.
And she was community too. She was involved in the community and
Yeah.
helping, advance that. And then eventually moved to Detroit and did the same thing there, and became a famous DJ there on WJLB.
That's a great story just in
Yeah.
itself.
Well, that's another story we're working on. And
Yeah.
the one that I wrote has Martha Jean in it, of course, because she's a player in that whole story. But
Yeah.
my story that I wrote was more of a tribute and an honoring of her father and all the musicians he played with, because they sort of invented rock and roll,
Yeah.
just by way of happenstance, if anything.
Yeah.
Including Phineas Newborn Jr. He was playing boogie woogie. He wasn't just playing Art Tatum stuff. He was playing everything, and he's
Yeah.
the one that influenced like Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard. I mean, all those players, down in New Orleans. Jelly Roll Morton, of course, was there alongside him. But I mean, that was what boogie woogie came from, was this really heavy riverboat kind of jazz, Dixieland meets boogie woogie. And a lot of people don't know the history of that, and they were playing that stuff long before Elvis came on the scene, believe me. He just sort of showed up and went, well, that's really cool. I'd like to do that too. And he used to hang out with Diane's father and Phineas Newborn Sr. and ask for suggestions on what to do and how to put a show together. Should I dye my blonde hair black? Because a lot of people don't even know that Elvis was a blonde. Where do I shop for clothes? How do you guys do all this? And how do you move your hips like that, Calvin Newborn? That looks like your hips are just connected. I really like that
Oh my
look.
God.
How do I do that? Nobody knows this story.
Wow. That's fascinating. That's great.
Yeah. So when you see this Elvis movie that's out right now, he was just a sponge that was hanging out with those families.
Yeah.
That
So
Colonel
does the
Parker
movie?
told him not to tell the story. He says, you can't tell that story, Elvis, because you're the king.
Yeah.
It has to come from you. You can't let these other people take credit because you're the king.
So
And
does
that's
this
what happened.
movie that's out now, is it in your, did you see it? Is it
I
accurate?
haven't seen it yet, but I've seen them all before, and I know what it's going to do. And Elvis was very talented. He was very handsome.
Yeah.
His voice was okay. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, let's face it. I mean, he had a style.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and he was very good. But what he did, he took the black idiom that he appropriated and he took it to the world. And they
Yeah.
gave him permission. I mean, all these people that I just were mentioning, I mean, they said, look, we're black. We can't do it. This is Jim Crow. You got to go out and do it for us. And they liked him. They were friends with him. And he was he wasn't a racist.
Yeah.
He was very, very open to hanging out. In fact, he used to get teased and he used to get like beat up and stuff thrown at him in high school because he was hanging out with black people studying their idiom. And that was like a no-no back then.
Yeah.
So in that respect, I have a lot of respect for him as an artist.
Yeah.
But he was just lucky. He was just the guy that was there at the right time.
Yeah. Well, that seems to come up all the time on these conversations. I've talked with about over 400 people, and it's people, no matter what their level of success, they had a desire in mind, and they were moving forward, and they never stopped. They just kept moving forward. And some guy said he had a scholarship in hangology, because he would hang out, and he was hanging out with Charlie Parker, and Charlie Mingus came in, and Charlie said, "You should use this guy," and he said, "Okay, you want to come to Europe?" And he did. So, but it seems that bigger, even more dramatic than that. You're living your life, and shit happens, and then you keep moving forward. Again, it's kind of like what we were talking about before, as far as the lessons that translate. Yeah, I mean, that's what happens in life. That's what happens in music. That's what happens everywhere. You can apply that lesson. That if you just keep moving forward, your things happen. You
Yep.
know, and I don't know.
Gotta have a sharp hook and a good presentation.
So I was telling Kenny, a lot of you on this, about no, that I wrote this little book, The Act of Becoming, very tiny little pocketbook, and it's philosophy, and I just basically it's about how one lesson that you have in a certain area of life applies to any area of your life. And Kenny was saying that his fishing and his sales talent, actually, he's seen that application.
Yep. When I was working retail for a while, Steve retired for about 4 years, 2001 through
Oh,
2004.
by the way, sorry for those of
Oh,
you who don't know, Steve Miller, because Kenny,
oh, Steve Miller Band. Yeah.
because you've played
Uh,
with Steve for a long
yeah, I've been
time.
with him for 40 years touring and 41 years working with him. 41 years ago in 1981 is when I started working on the Abracadabra album with him. That's when I joined the band,
Wow.
and when started touring with him in 82. So we just played Summerfest night before last, and that was my 40th anniversary of playing
Oh man.
Summerfest with him, because we were on our way to Europe with the Abracadabra album, which hadn't had a hit yet, uh, to tour Europe. And we played the Summerfest in 1982.
Oh my
So that was
God.
kind of fun to play and take a 40th anniversary.
Wow.
But anyway, getting back to what you were saying, yes, I've always used fishing, which I've done all my life, as a metaphor and a teaching tool of how you win people over to
Yeah.
helping them find what they need and what they want.
Yeah.
And like I said, sharp hook, good presentation, timing, a little deception sometimes. It doesn't mean that you're not selling them something that they can use, but it might be something they may not need at
Yeah.
that moment in time. But when they get it and they take it home, all of a sudden they're just like, boy, I'm glad I got this. I'm glad Kenny talked me into getting this with him. Really having a good time with this guitar or this amp or whatever. Because I worked for Guitar Center as a manager when
Oh.
Steve retired in 2001, right after the millennium. He got tired of Napster and SFX telling him who his opening act was going to be and charging a fortune for parking. And, I mean, all the things that he hated about what was going on in the business. He just said, that's it, I'm going home. So he took his football and he went home. We didn't have a game. So I had to go back to work again in the corporate sector. And I chose Guitar Center because I figured if I became a manager, I could make, close to the money I was making with Steve. But, that's what I did with sales. And I became a top salesman at Guitar Center using my fishing techniques as ways of attracting people to biting and closing the deal, and basically all sales is selling yourself. If you ever read Zig Ziglar, basically he just says, if you just help people find what they need, you'll have everything you'll want in life. That's his basic formula. It's just like, you just have to help people find what they need. That's it, and
Love that.
but you have to help distill them in that direction, help them find that. Same thing with real estate, when you're trying to help a couple or somebody buy a house or something, you got to help them find the perfect place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so all that ties in for me for fishing, because I fish all the time and I study fish. And of course, even though they have little tiny little pea brains, they're pretty smart and they got pretty good vision too. And you got to be really on top of it if you're going to try to talk a big wary trout into rising to a fly. It's hard. And then when they come up, you feel kind of bad, like, oh my God, he fell for it, you know. That's why I respect them, and I net them properly, and I take a little photo, and then I let them go, you know, because they
Oh,
deserve to go back, you know. The little pan fryers we catch when we're backpacking, yeah, we're going to eat those. But
yeah.
that's because most of the time, like if we're catching brown trout, for instance, up in the Sierras, they're non-indigenous. They're not supposed to be there anyway.
Oh,
Some maniac fish and game guy thought he played God and introduced brown trout up in the mountains, and they're killing off all the, indigenous species, the goldens and the rainbows and the cutthroats and all that. It's like these brown trout aren't supposed to be there. So guess what? They end up in my frying pan.
wow. You must eat a lot of trout.
No, when I'm fortunate enough to be able to be fishing for them.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's great. I love hearing about that. That's just really great.
But the same
Especially,
thing is when you go audition for a gig, you got to talk a big star and his manager into letting you go into their band and go on the road with them. You got to have a good presentation.
what
Got to
does
make
that
them feel
entail?
good about themselves.
So you're making them feel good. Well, you're obviously making them feel good about you. But
Correct.
what does it entail?
You're selling yourself.
Yeah.
You're the hook. You're the product. And so what you want to do is you want to make people feel that if they don't get you, they're not going to be as hip as they could be, or as efficient as they could be, or as talented as they could be, or, and then you try to make them feel good too. So then that way they know when they get stuck with you in the middle of the night on a tour bus, they're going to enjoy hanging out with you.
Yeah.
Because that's the main thing about touring business, is that you got to hang out with these people. I mean, it's not about the music. It's about just getting along in the
Yeah.
middle of the night in your underwear, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You hear really interesting stories about the road. I mean, I've been on the road tons, but with much smaller situations. But
It's all the same. It's all the same.
yeah, yeah, and the personalities are.
It's just like the
Never.
audience. The audience is the same too. It's either 10,000 or 100 people, and it's the same. You're only going to see the first couple rows anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, you're just performing for a group of people.
yeah. How much when you're performing? Um, what's the percentage of you? Let's see, how do I say this? Kind of you perceiving your own space, the band, having a good time just with the band, as opposed to selling the audience on you.
Well, I think that each entertainer has a little radar kind of screen
Yeah,
attached to their head or their body or whatever, and it only goes so far. When they talk about 20 feet from stardom, that 20 feet is a radar circle.
yeah,
It's like you're not going to encroach any farther than 20 feet if you're on this pay grade. If you're a partner or you're like somebody that's been in the band for a long time and you're interplaying with the big star up front, then it might be 10 feet. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
we all have our little world that we entertain in, but that little world that we're in is ours. We own that little space. And so people in the audience sometimes, they'll come to hear a big act, but they might cue into somebody that maybe didn't write the song or even sing the song. They'll just like somebody that's on stage that's got the electricity and then the radar's on, and they're like going, I'm really digging what that conga player is doing right now. I'm just going to watch him. I'm just digging what he's doing. I mean, I'm going to watch him for the rest of the night.
yeah, yeah,
And when he smiles, it makes me feel good. When he
yeah,
stands up once in a while, throws his hands in the air, I get excited. So that's the guy I'm going to cue in on. So it doesn't really matter how important the hit is or how many, interviews you've had, or whether you had 900 divorces and been in the covers of magazines, or I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, once you're in the live playing mode, the audience may not cue into just one person. So your little world, you're responsible for. So you got to put on a show, and your show is all your skill sets coming forward, playing, singing, dancing, moving, whatever it is, your clothes, whatever it is that makes somebody else that's down there in the audience go, you know what, I really dig what that guy or that woman is doing, and I would really love to do that myself. So I'm just going to get into that vibe with them, and I'm going to ride that wave with them all the way to the shore, you know. And it's like, you're responsible for that person that came and paid money for you, or the act in general, but they're queuing in you. So at that point, it's your show personally with that personal person. And that's all that matters. It doesn't really matter there's a big star over here singing a big hit. You're now connected with somebody in the audience that is having an experience with you. And it's like, you're responsible for making sure they go home feeling great.
Cool. I never spoke with somebody okay, I guess you call yourself a sideman in that instance, but who has that kind of point of view exactly, or maybe I just didn't ask the right question. That's really
A good
interesting.
example would be the E Street Band.
Uh-huh.
Clarence, the
Okay.
saxophone player.
Yeah.
Remember him before he passed?
No.
You don't remember Bruce Springsteen's the E Street Band? Okay, you're a jazz.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you're a
I didn't
jazzer.
really follow Bruce. Sorry, I know who Bruce is, but I didn't really
So
follow.
for your listeners, for lack of a better example, I mean, he was a very flamboyant saxophone player, but he
Yeah.
didn't write, he didn't sing, he didn't really have a record deal of his own, or I mean, he was just a guy up on stage doing his thing. But
Yeah.
he had a complete set of following that was separate unto Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
So Clarence Clemens was a star unto his own right just from what he did. People would come to see him and only him,
Yeah.
even though it was a Bruce Springsteen concert.
Yeah.
You understand what
I
I'm saying?
I do. I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
And Bruce knew that, so that's why he took care of his band. Because all those individual people had fans. I mean, look at little Steven Van Zandt. I mean, he's become a big star now, even though he's not a great guitar player, he's not a great singer, he's not a really great entertainer. He's okay at all those, but he has a personality, and he ended up on The Sopranos. He ended up becoming the guy that like hosts the Grammys and stuff. You know, it's like he's just a personality, but he was just a side man that
Yeah.
Bruce let go. He just said, just go, you know. I'm
Yeah.
just using that band as an example.
Yeah. 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 And that's just another reason why the lead person should be supportive of who the
Well, it's
people.
kind of your responsibility. You have to come to it on your own. I mean,
Yeah.
whoever your employer is not going to come to you and say, "Hey, you know, you really need to step up your game to outshine me while I'm doing my show." They're not going to say that. As far as they're concerned, they wish you would just kind of go over into the dark and disappear. You know, because you're
Yeah.
taking light away from their spotlight. So it's very subtle and subliminal,
Yeah.
but it is your responsibility as an entertainer to make sure you're bringing your skill set to the forefront. You're bringing it every time, and
Yeah.
that the audience is just having a great time.
Yeah.
That's live.
Uh,
Now,
on a,
studio is a whole other thing. You know?
oh yeah, definitely. And I definitely want to hear your point of view of that. I just wanted to put in, um, this is kind of what you're talking about, but it's just like a little bit, left. So what I like to tell my students is that there's three universes. So this is especially good for singers, especially jazz singers, because the venues are smaller, right? So the first universe is you. You have to bring your skill set. You have to make sure everything's right and good and you know what you're doing. The second universe is that and the musicians, not the audience, just you and the musicians. And within that, there has to be a connection, magic. There has to be something happening. Then the third universe opens up to the audience to share that with the audience, because a lot of times, especially inexperienced singers, will start with the audience, which is so wrong. It's like, no, that is just so not what you're supposed to be doing. And I was just curious, on a big stage with a band like that, for thousands of people in the audience, do you find yourself doing the same thing? Like, it's probably a mixture of things. Partly you're together with the band and making magic and enjoying each other, and then there's awarenesses that the audience is there, and I would assume.
It's apples and oranges. It's still in the basket, but
Yeah.
it's apples and oranges because the jazz world and small jazz venues are a very personal, upfront, up close, and usually pretty quiet. unless you're waiting for the applause in the song. I mean, you're supposed to be quiet because there's subtleties going on in jazz and stuff where you don't want people talking and clinking glasses in the back. That happens at the vibrato club a lot, which is a drag.
I
Because
know.
vibrato is starting to turn more blues, jazz, blues rock now. Whereas when it first started, what Herb Alpert wanted to be was just jazz. And so now you get all these execs in the back and they got money and they're throwing around because it's in Bel Air. They're in the back and they're like in the middle of a ballad while females up there in a gown trying to sing a really soft torch ballad. And it's hard,
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But when we're on stage with a very large stage situation, if there's no big screens, we're little tiny ants about this tall to most of the people that are watching us. We're just these little figures, or kind of stick figures going across the stage. And if you have poor vision, you're not even going to focus. But now we have these big screens, so that helps. So now you can at least see the faces of the fans. But it's a little different. And then also there's the material. In an act such as ours, we have hit records that are giant hits that play on classic rock radio every hour on the hour. Jazz clubs are having acts that are interpreting and probably doing their own arrangements on either the American Songbook or some original piece they've written that has never been on the radio. And it has been. It's maybe on some weird station up in Berkeley, like in the middle of the night, so it's a different kind of a comparison, because what we're doing is we're supporting a giant catalog, like I said, that is just a part of American history now. Yeah. And it is the American Songbook. The American Songbook of standards and jazz standards and bebop tunes has now moved aside. And that's the thing I was talking about. When my father-in-law was in Memphis in 1947 playing with Tuff Green and the Rocketeers, and they said, we're going to have to cut the band back because we can't afford to have all these horns. We got to get it down to a smaller rhythm section. We're going to have to start moving around a little more. The bass player's going to have to do more tricks, stand on his bass, put it on top of his feet. I mean, this is who we're competing with. I mean, it's like we got to make sure that we can survive. So they were still doing swing jazz, if you want, but it was starting to turn into boogie woogie. And it wasn't something that they wanted to have happen. It was just that the audiences were shrinking and the show needed to become more exciting. And that's kind of what happened when that all went down. So to answer your question, is there a difference? Yes, absolutely. Does it transcend? Is the three spheres that you spoke of come into play? Unfortunately, it's in a different order. We come out and all of a sudden the audience is completely turned on and they're screaming and yelling because they have this history with the catalog. See, it's not about us, it's the catalog. It's songs that they listened to when they were having their first relationship, when they were going through their first divorce, when they were having their first baby, when they fell off the roof and broke their ribs, and had to recover, get an operation, listen to Hendrix in the operating room when they were operating, give them a new heart valve. It's like everybody's got a different connection to this catalog, Yeah. So right off the bat, when we walk on stage, it's the audience. It's all about the audience. So then we do have to have a camaraderie with the band. But guess what? We're playing hits and we're playing the same arrangement almost every night. So the band doesn't necessarily have to be so in tune with each other because we already know what we're going to play and at what level and at what tempo and at what blending. Our vocal blend is going to be a certain blend. We've already figured out mathematically. So the guy in the house can put the harmonizer on and split it left, right, and make this big giant vocal stack. That is all something that's already figured out. And all we have to do is just deliver it, And then the audience, comes first. The band comes kind of second, in terms of our performance. And then third, does the band enjoy it? Are we in tune with one another? Are we having fun on stage? Are we smiling at each other? Do we have interplay? We have to kind of force that a little sometimes because that's the last thing on the list is whether or not we're having fun as musicians. Because we're really not there for us. We're there for the audience and we're there for the catalog. And then if the band has fun, that's icing on the cake. The band doesn't have to have fun for the show to be successful and to get paid.
Yeah. Wow. Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, this is a cool conversation. You mentioned you were going to say something about the studio before I went down this little path.
I'm just saying that the studio is a whole other thing. That's crafting your song craftsmanship. In my business, of course, I was never a bebop guy, although I do have a jazz album out, and I have an arrangement of Only Had a Brain that I did with my bass player, who is an upright jazz player, that if you listen to it, it's the hippest thing you ever heard in jazz you've ever heard, and I'm a rock and roll guitar player playing it. It's just the way that it's presented, it sounds great, and I've had bebop people come up to me, man, that's badass, I'm going, well, I'm glad you like it, because, I had to kind of get produced doing that, and have some chord substitutions, and, I'm playing Wes Montgomery technique with my thumb, and the whole bit, and it's like, it was a great experience. But in my business, to go into the studio and to write a hit, one thing Steve Miller always taught me was that kind of like your three spheres on stage performance, he always said you have to have three hooks. Remember we talked about fishing?
Yeah.
In this way, he said you have to have three hooks. He goes, I don't care what they are. He goes, it'd be a sound effect. It could be a lyric. It could be some kind of a guitar riff that repeats several times throughout the song. It could be a cat call, like on the Joker. Woo, woo! It's like, you can't believe how big that is when we go out and play, that people go nuts for this cat call, which is on a slide guitar with a wah-wah. It's not a big deal. It's real low-tech analog. But the people lose their brain over that. So he just fell upon this thing. It's like he didn't even know. In fact, when he wrote that song, he didn't even think it was going to make the album. He threw it together at the last minute. He used a couple lyrics that were in some, actually they were public domain blues songs, but he couldn't prove it, or he didn't get a good lawyer enough to prove it. But he actually got taken to court by Armin Erdogan over Really Love Your Peaches, Want to Shake Your Tree, and Lovey Dovey, because that was the name of a song that Armin had that had that lyric in it, and it's like he was able to prove in court that he owned that lyric. It was an old lyric from an old Mississippi Sheiks thing written by a gentleman that wrote Sitting on Top of the World. And Sitting on Top of the World were one of the original lyrics. If you don't like my peaches, don't shake my tree. And that was done way back in the 20s. So it's public domain.
Yeah.
So Steve didn't even think that would go on the album. So this is how crazy it is when you're going in the studio and you're doing sound crafting. A lot of times the music is just sort of a support system for the hooks. The hooks are the things that bring the people in, that makes them relate to it, that makes them never forget the title or a sound effect or an abstract lyric. Black panties with an angel's face. I mean, in Abracadabra. I mean, he just wrote that because he was thinking of Diana Ross. I mean, that's sort of an inside thing that a lot of people don't know about. But these are just little things that happen by way of happenstance, and you're in there like a magician, and you're trying to come up with this elixir that's going to make people get excited and want to gravitate towards it. So you got to kind of think about what you're doing when you go in the studio, completely different than live performance. You're just crafting and layering and delivering up a 3-minute gem. At least in the old days, it used to be 3 minutes, yeah. And that will make people want to come to your show, because you're going to make your money having them come to the show, maybe buy the record at the show, or buy your merch, buy your hat and your shirt and whatever else, and that's how you make a living in rock and roll. It's been that way a long time. Yeah. But it's a completely different thing than like when you go in 1956 with Bird and Dizzy, and you got Kluk on drums. Yeah. And you got, Richard Davis or Scott LaFaro on bass, and you're sitting here and you're going like, let's do our version of that Monk tune. What is that? Like apostrophe, anthropology. Take anthropology. Okay, let's do our take on that. And they sit down and they take 3 or 4 takes, and then they're done for the day. It's like they've already spent everything they have blowing into that song, and then hopefully maybe 1,000 people will buy the record.
Yeah.
So, see, that's the thing that made my father-in-law, who was one of the great trumpet players of the South. He used to play with Dizzy. He used to share chairs with Dizzy on Cab Calloway's band, on Count Basie's band, and also with Lionel Hampton's band. And when rock and roll came, he just kind of went, you know what? I'm going to go become a lather and join the union and do wallboard, because I don't even want to be involved in this business anymore. Because I can't, because he grew up with, he used to have Elvis sit in with him. He would let him sit in with his band just sort of like as a novelty. So let's see what the kid can do. They'd sing and do his little thing. Like, yeah, he's cute, nice kid. All right, get out of here. It's like, that's the way it was, and it's like, when that all turned around, all these jazz cats, man, they just went, you know what? I'd rather just go, drive a truck, take care of my kids. Because I'm not going to be able to make a living anymore playing jazz. I could go to Europe, like Dizzy, and do the JADL concerts, that lasted into the 60s, late 60s. And then, maybe you get the Newport Jazz Festival or something, but it died. It died on the vine, and it's like me growing up and watching that, I just kind of went, well, I think I'm going to go with rock and roll.
Yeah.
Because I think I'd like to buy a house and put my kids through college. And that heroin thing is like, if I got to do heroin to get the real shit, I think I'll pass.
So I do have some people commenting, and so I'm just going to pass through this. You can comment whatever.
Okay.
Tommy McShear is probably a friend of yours, I'm guessing.
Tony?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Tony.
Yeah, baby Tony McShear, baby. How you doing, baby?
He's loving the view from the porch.
Ah, yeah.
Jeff Militich, it's all about the hang.
Yeah, that's right. I have a band actually with a group of celebrity guys. It's called the Hang Dynasty.
Oh.
And we do gigs around town. It's in LA, all over the country. It's called the Hang Dynasty. And it's not about, it's like a Han Dynasty Chinese look with our logo has a dragon, but it's called the Hang Dynasty. But it's about the hang.
That's cool. Taylor Hatch says it's good to see you. So maybe he knows you, guitar player Taylor.
Okay.
Let's see. Taylor says over time, what was the one epiphany you had in your development that changed your viewpoint on music? How did it transform you?
Well, I think when I went to college and I went to play with jazz orchestra, and I finally figured out a way to learn how to improvise over chord changes and make it sound like I knew what I was doing and wasn't playing the same, minor blues riffs over everything. I finally started realizing that I could connect things chromatically, that I could use chord substitutions, and then I can, kind of melodically pick notes within triads that connected from one chord to the next. That's when I realized that I might have a voice as a soloist. That was before I became a really good singer too. I mean, I was singing in those days, but I was more of just a kind of like a cover band singer. I wasn't really singing like great stuff. And then later on, I learned how to, improvise and even scat a little bit and stuff. And, that came with time. But I would say that it was probably around that time that I was in jazz orchestra. I was probably around 17 or 18 years old.
Cool. Taylor has questions that go along this thread. So let's see. He said, what was one thing you remember working hard on in practice that took you a long time until you got it perfectly?
When I did some transcriptions on Wes Montgomery solos, he was this ridiculous guitar player, as you know, that was trained in Indianapolis. He didn't read music.
Uh-huh.
His theory came from a guy that I actually met when I was in Indianapolis at one point, who was the teacher for Monk and Buddy and all the whole family. And it was a certain kind of a Spud Murphy, kind of a weird little, you would see like little compartments of improvisational modules, if you were, that were up and down the fretboard or up and down the keyboard that you could work around if you could figure out how to dazzle people like inside that. As long as you just learn the basic chord structure, you could come up with this incredible improvisational thing. Anyway, so now I'm listening to like, Riverside recordings with Wes from the late 50s, where he's playing these ridiculous things. And one of them was, God, not Wonderful Tonight, but Look tonight, the way you
Oh,
look
the way
tonight.
you look tonight.
Thank you. Couldn't remember. I was confused it with the Clapton tune, Wonderful Tonight. So anyway, there's a version that he does. It's take two. Oh my God. And so I transcribed it and I had to learn it. And the keyboard player that I was playing with at the time, Jeff Paris, he and I wanted to play it in unison. So I had to write it out. And that was our break tune for our band that we had called the Barflies, which I still have, this band called Barflies. But in those days, we were wearing shark skin suits and pork pie hats. And I was playing with Dominic Genova and Rick
Oh my God.
Murata. And we were doing the BB Kings there in the Universal Studios.
Oh my
And
God.
we were playing this stuff for real. We were playing this jazz stuff.
Yeah.
And to take that down, to write it out, and then to rehearse it and to play it with a keyboard player in unison, the solo, it was a solo. That was a life experience. It's kind of like giant steps for some guys, when they sit down on a horn, doing giant steps. I mean, guitar too.
Yeah.
And you learn it at different speeds and different keys and all that stuff. Once you've learned giant steps and all the keys and all the tempo, you can do anything, it's like, but
Right.
that was what it was for me. The Way You Look Tonight, 1959, Riverside, West Montgomery, playing with that doggone thumb with that corn on his, thumb. I mean, geez. I mean, so that was, and we actually pulled it off. And if I were to sit down and try to do it right now, I'd never be able to do it. I'd have to woodshed it for a week, so that was an epiphany.
That's fun. And Jeff Paris, the keyboard player, he used to be the jazz player, right?
Yeah. Kind of, he plays with blues groups right now. He's playing with Coco Montoya.
But I think he
did tour with
originally
Stanley Clarke and George Duke at one point.
Yeah, I think originally he was, can't remember what his last name was, but I used to work with him.
Yeah, his name is Jeff Lieb.
Yeah. I bumped into
I had my
him
first
last
record
year.
deal together with Jeff. And he
That's so
introduced me to Diane. That's how long I've known Jeff.
Oh my God. Yeah, I bumped into him on a little gig, that my friend had, and I sat in and he said, Cathy Segal-Garcia? And I said, yeah. And he said, Jeff Lieb. I was like, what? Oh my God. Yeah. He sounded great. Oh my God. And he had such great energy. Wow.
Yeah. No, he's an amazing musician. He's done a lot of different styles. When I met him, he was Blue-Eyed Soul. He was doing kind of like, Stevie Wonder meets Donny Hathaway meets Bobby Caldwell, and writing like that too.
Yeah.
And we put a band together called Pieces, and we got the deal, and we came out in 1979. And guess what hit in 1979? My Sharona. And the next thing you know, Blue-Eyed Soul was out, and you had to have a thin tie with electric guitars doing sort of an English invasion new wave, great kooky thing. My Sharona. You had to be into this weird stuff. They didn't want to hear any more, the Hall & Oates, no Michael McDonald, no Bobby Caldwell. We were all out. Doobie Brothers, with Michael McDonald. All that stuff was gone. So unfortunately, our record never took off. But we did a record, and it's on YouTube. You can look it up. It's called Pieces. And it has Candy's Lifesavers on it. If you see those, that's our Pieces band. And Jeff has a bunch of tunes on YouTube on there, and they're just fantastic. Wow. I wrote a couple in there as well, but mine were more rock pop. His were R&B, Blue-Eyed Soul, great records. And he was just a fantastic artist. But he had to learn how to play guitar again and go out and get a record deal and play like this 80s hair band music because he had to survive.
Yeah.
And then now he's kind of coming back to his roots, and he's on the road with Coco Montoya right now.
Yeah. Interesting. You have a few friends, it looks like, here too. Terry Commandy. Did Diane get a new microwave then?
Well, I told her, I said, just go to Walmart and buy a tabletop model, put it on the island, and we'll deal with the built-in later. And the microwave did blow up, so,
It's pretty funny, huh?
I don't know. That's up to Diane. I'm not home. I can't learn to survive and get her own microwave.
And then Jody Doherty, welcome back to the woods. Looking forward to hanging out around the fire.
Yes, it's a neighbor right here in the neighborhood. She's just tuning in. That's great. You've been here a bunch of times.
Let's see, Taylor. Taylor? Oh, yeah, this is a good question, Taylor. And I'd like to hear Kenny's viewpoint on this. If you could change one thing about the music industry now, what would it be and why?
I think that it's a good question because I'm old school, and Bob Lefsetz has always beaten me up. Or when I say beaten me up, I don't mean me personally, but he always beats up the old dinosaur classic rock guys. He's our age, but he has a cutting edge newsletter, as you know, where he talks about how we need to get up off it and realize that if we want to get noticed, if we want to be successful in music business, we can't worry about the Napster thing anymore, and streaming and people stealing our music, because technology has just taken that away. It's very, very hard for us to control the mechanical portion of our sales. It's all streaming now. And as you know, streaming doesn't pay anything. So the only thing that I can say is that it would be nice if some tech head could come up with an encryption on the audio waveform that would make it such that if you couldn't even play that waveform unless you entered in a certain amount of money, even if it was 50 cents, I don't care.
Yeah.
It would be like what used to happen with the jukebox, but it would be an electronic jukebox situation where the waveform has an encryption that's overlapped over the audio waveform, to where when you start to play it, it might play 10 seconds of it, kind of like they do when they do the samples on iTunes and Spotify, whatever, and then, but it can't even be played, or shared unless there's some kind of royalty going to the writer.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if it's possible. That's not really an industry thing as far as the question goes, but it's a tech thing that would be tied into the industry in terms of royalties going to the writers. I stopped writing music or chasing the hit, gem, because I didn't see any future in it. I mean, it's like, even if I write a great song and I get it out there, it ain't going to pay that good. It's like, what I would like to do is just keep doing music for art's sake. And I'll put out product for my fans and friends and stuff, but it's more like just for fun, because there's just no money in going and killing yourself in the studio trying to write this hit record anymore.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, you look at Bruno Mars. I mean, here he is. He's one of the top performing artists right now, and he's doing recordings. If he gets up 10 million streams, you might pay some bills, buy a car.
Yeah.
But it ain't like it used to be, where you were buying mansions and investing in real estate and,
Yeah.
setting yourself up for the rest of your life. It's like, that was why I really got into the commercial pop rock world in the first place, was that I saw a really nice return on the royalties. I mean, that was what Al Jolson got into it for. He just wanted to make a bunch of money with publishing and writing. The singing was just kind of part of it.
Yeah, the Spotify thing kills me. It's like 0.003 cents comes to me. I'm always like baffled by that. It's like, where is the rest of the money going to? Who's it going to?
Well, like I said, the concert live industry now is the only way we can make a living. That's why
Yeah.
I'm doing it. And
Yeah.
I'll do it till I can still stand up there and shake my booty and not look too gross as an old man, playing rock and roll. I'm trying to keep it going. Now, right now, I kind of look like a Viking, warrior on stage with a suit on or something, but I'm just trying to keep it so it's interesting, artistic, and kind of provocative, when it becomes boring and people stop showing up, then, I got to see if I can get an agent so I can write my books.
Well, yeah, by then you'll be the book writer. And actually, I'm going to look at your book here. Let's see. Where is it? Here, Skeleton Dolls. So Kenny's written a trilogy here, and
well, this is not the trilogy. This is just book one of the trilogy.
Right.
Yeah.
But is it trilogy in planning only, or is it actually?
The second one is actually written, and that's when I'm shopping to agents, and they're going, I really like the idea, but not my cup of tea. So I'm getting a lot of those, and my dad used to get the same thing, because my dad, when he retired, he started writing novels, and I've been down this road with him before. In fact, I have all of his manuscripts. A bunch of them are over in that trailer right over there. But it's like, that was when everything was hard copy. But yeah, this was the first of 3 books that I wrote. And this is like it says there, it's about these twins that speak in twin speak, which is, similar to speaking in tongues in church and whatnot. And I allude to the fact that it was a language that existed prior to the Tower of Babel being destroyed. So if you know Torah and you know Jewish, Old Testament, teachings, we got really intelligent at one point, and we learned all this mathematics skills and all these, architecture skills, and we were like building craft that could defy gravity, and it's all in the Bible. I didn't write this. You just look it up in the Old Testament, and it talks about how we were trying to build this building that went up to the clouds that was the Tower of Babel, and that's why the word babbling, when somebody's babbling, when you can't understand what they're saying, it comes from that biblical scripture. Always just babbling. That's because the Tower of Babel, and so cool. We built this thing. It went up in the sky, and we were trying to reach God. And in a way, it was kind of like complimenting him, because we were just wanting to be the children coming to the Father, But it says in the Bible that God was angry. He got angry with us trying to be gods. And so he destroyed the tower. And not only did he destroy the tower, he destroyed that language. And we've never spoken that language since. And what he did is he spread all the different people then that were in that one area at that time. And I allude in my second book that this is the one I'm trying to sell right now, that actually explains where that all happened, where the Garden of Eden was, where this Tower of Babel was. I explain all that in my own terms based upon biblical precepts. But the language is the important thing. It had power. We spoke to God. When Noah said, build the ark, he said, how long? 30 cubits. Okay, thanks. It was a conversation. It wasn't just coming into the head. When Moses spoke to the burning bush, it was talking to him. He was talking back. It wasn't like transcendental meditation and then we're speaking to me through my brain. It said, it wasn't in the Bible. It just says we talked to God and he would answer. That was the language, and it had power. And so I suggest that after the Tower of Babel, the language was repressed, but it existed inside a small coven of people that came from a certain place. I'm not going to spoil where it came from because that's in the next book, but it alludes to a place in the Atlantic, and it spills its way over to the Azores and the Canaries, ends up in Britannia, where the Celts got that language. And then I talk about Merlin, and I talk about his incantations and what he was able to do by using that language. So I tie that ancient Tower of Babel stuff in with, ancient cultic folklore, because I am a Lewis, I'm Welsh. And I've been to Wales, I've been to Carnarvon, I've been to where Merlin used to hang out. I know all about all the stories of because, the Druids didn't have a written language. They did everything with symbols. And so you can't really prove any of this because there's nothing written down, but there is some historians that wrote about, this, Briethian, Welsh Druid warrior whose name was Merlin, who actually helped, build England from the bottom up, along with, whoever the king was at the time, who was breaking away from the Romans. He was a part of that warrior bunch. And of course, if you go way back in history, like 500 BC, the Celts were actually like the Romans. They actually came out of Britannia. They went over to Europe. They went all the way down to Rome. They sacked Rome. They were the ones that invented the catapult and the crossbow and those big spears and burning people up, with the oil, all the stuff we see in these series. That was the Celts that invented all that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. And then they ended up back in England. And then Boudica was their last female leader, because if they were the ones, just like the Vikings, that had females that were shield maidens. And Boudica was the last, one. Anyway, but I digress. The book basically is about these female twins in modern times that use that language into their adult life, and they're actually able to sing certain melodies that are taught to them by their mothers. It's a female mother to daughter taught, handed down coven, not witchcraft so much, but just this language and the singing, which makes it so you can like raise the dead or heal people or change things. It's pretty interesting. So that's what this book is.
Yeah, sounds great. And
Yeah, and it was
where does
based
the
on a true
name
story.
where
Because
does the
like I said,
name come
I met
from?
these twins and I met the mother and they explained to me what they were like when they were little. And I said, can I run with this story and kind of make it go Stephen King? They said, okay, just change the names. So it's based on a true story.
Where does the name come from?
Skeleton dolls.
Skeleton dolls? Yeah.
Well, there's a scene in the book. I don't want to spoil it, but it's actually part of the true story where these two girls that I met in real life, their mother told me that their horse had gotten old, and her and her husband. This is up in upstate Minnesota. The horse had to be euthanized, and they didn't want the girls to experience because they really loved this horse. So they went off to preschool or something. And so while they were gone, they dug a grave like miles away from the house out in the woods somewhere, dug a ramp with a tractor, shot the horse, put it out of its misery because it was blind and old and suffering, whatever, and buried it. We're talking like they got him a pony, the pony, they couldn't ride it, but they loved riding this old horse. So they were still pining for their old horse. So this was these twins that would speak in their own language and sing in their own language. This is a true story. So the mother says, well, apparently they got up one morning and they were really missing the horse. And so they got in their pajamas and they put on their cowboy boots and they started doing an incantation, holding hands, and they actually divined, just like the way a diviner does to find a well, like a water wiccan. They divined where the horse was. The
Wow.
parents were asleep, and they went out into the woods and they found out where the horse was buried. They took off their cowboy boots. This is a true story. They start digging up this horse. It's been dead for months. It's rotting. What do they do? Because their mom was a biology teacher. They always used to see these equine, and they were horse people, skeleton diagrams inside these medical biology books. So they started pulling the bones out of the grave and reassembling them on the side of the grave. Because guess what they were going to do next? They were going to resurrect the bones and resurrect the horse so they could ride it again. This is a true story. The hair on my arm is standing up just talking about it. I mean, I asked the mom, I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, can I put this into a book? She said, yeah, if you want to, go ahead and change the name. So that's where the name came from, because they were going to reanimate the skeleton as a doll so they could make it like a marionette so they could ride it again.
Wow.
And of course, the parents finally found them while they were reassembling it, but they had actually started reassembling. It actually looked like a horse on the side of the grave. They were putting the horse back together, and they found him. And that's when the mom took it upon herself to get the biology book, explain to them that the spirit was gone, the flesh was gone, the muscles aren't going to work anymore. It's really nice, girls, that you wanted to do this, but it's not going to happen, And of course, in the book,
it does happen.
So that's the book. So that's where the skeleton doll's name comes from.
Now you mentioned kind of the well, you mentioned Stephen King in your description, so
Yeah,
you might think that the book is scary.
there's some scary parts. I mean, there's a creature or a spirit or a archangel, if you will, that is the one that decides whether you and I are going to depart this plane.
Yeah.
When we're on the operating table, when we're on the gurney, or we slip and fall or whatever, this archangel shows up, and it's in the Bible. I didn't write this either. It's an archangel. It's called Samuel. It's not Samuel. It's Samuel. Samuel. Just like Michael and Gabriel. Well, this is Samuel. And guess what? It's the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper comes and decides whether he's going to restore the soul back into you so you can come back into this world and live for another 20, 30 years or whatever you're going to do. Or he says, no, it's your time. I'm taking your soul. Here it goes. That creature is what's on the cover of the book. So when you're looking at the cover there, that's the creature.
Wait, let's look at that.
It's called the Asphyx in ancient folklore. Yeah, if you can bring that back.
This.
There you go. Can you zoom in on that? There you go. There you go. See that creature there?
Yeah.
That's Samuel. That's the archangel that decides whether your soul is going to go with him or it back to the cosmos, or whether it's going to restore it back into your body. And the twins can deal with this guy with their songs and their language, because the language of God connects to the archangels that originally are a part of Jewish, religion folklore. Like when you see those two archangels that are on the top of the Ark of the Covenant in
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Yeah.
that's what they are. That's what they are. They help God, or the creator, if you will, which isn't necessarily male or female. It's just a power that
Yep.
that decides this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's all part of the language that was destroyed when Tower of Babel was destroyed. It had power. And then if you sing these incantations in certain frequencies, it makes your blood move a different direction, kind of like a magnet with copper and blah, 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 and your chi's realigning and,
Yeah.
your energy force and blah, blah, blah. So they're actually able to resurrect people. So that's where the book starts, is that they save one of their friends in school that drowns in a farm pond. And the news shows up with the coroner, and they pronounce the kid dead. And the two girls go, no, 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 that's our friend. And they go over and they resurrect him on live TV. That's where the book starts.
Cool.
Oh, it's great.
Oh my God.
So it could be a really great
buying it.
series too. It's just that I got to get somebody to believe in it, So
Yeah.
I'm shopping agents now. I have given it to a TV guy too, who works with Netflix and Amazon, and he read it and he was close. But then COVID hit. It was right when they were thinking about maybe doing it as a series. COVID hits and all the production got shut down and everything. And he goes, I'm sorry, we just can't move on this right now. And I tried getting back in touch with him recently, and it's like, I guess he's not, into it anymore. So it's tough. It's just like good presentation, sharp hook. You keep putting it out there. Hopefully the trout will bite someday. So you just keep going.
Yeah. You have a few other friends who popped on. Let's see, Adam Levine.
Yeah.
He said, "You're a legend here on the Central Coast."
Well, so is he. He's not a Berkeley graduate, but he's what was the school in LA? Dick Grove. He's a Dick Grove graduate, which was kind of like the Berkeley of the West Coast.
Yes.
And he's a great guitar player, and he plays all around the Central Coast where I live, and he's fantastic.
Yeah, I actually have been wanting him. I don't think, Adam, we got a date yet. We've been talking about it for maybe 2 years or something. But anyway, so let's see. I wanted to also ask you or tell you. Oh, Terry Commandy said he wants to know, he or she wants to
Yep.
know
It's a she.
she any dates set for Ohio with the band?
Not this year, not yet. The closest being is going to be up in, well, actually, her sister-in-law is thinking of coming up. I've got a gig. See, she's Mohawk, Terry, that you're talking to right there. I have Mohawk ancestry in my family, and I'm very good friends with all the people of Six Nations up in Ontario. I'm doing an event on September 2nd at Art Park, which is something Michelle Elise Burnett is putting on in Canada, but she's just happening to use an American venue for it. And it's a Strawberry Festival meets Native American causes, and I co-produced a video and song that's up for a NAMI right now that's called Missing, and it deals with missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a very interesting subject. And I'm doing a show up there on September 2nd, and I think Patricia might be coming up there, Terry, and if you want to go with her, try to hook up with her. But that's going to be September 2nd.
That's
at
cool.
Art Park in Buffalo.
I have a friend who kind of disappeared out of my life who's Native American, and she was involved with, this was a number of years ago. There was this, I can tell you more about it later, but there was a kind of a political thing within the nation that was happening that she was almost like being a Democrat instead of a Republican, and she was.
Don't get me involved in that, Megan. I'll keep you on for hours. Go ahead.
Well, she and her family were getting really mistreated, and then I can't find her, and I often wonder. Sometimes I look for her. I wonder what happened to her. Like I don't know. Because I don't know to what extent it was.
Well, have you seen the series Yellowstone. with Kevin Costner.
I've never seen it. No.
It's really good, and of course, it's everything that I'm looking at right here. It's just everything he puts on that show. I mean, even it's fictional. It's all the other things that surround it is true, and they have Native American. They have a kind of a unknown tribe they use, but the issues and the things that are their problems up here are real. And one of the episodes, or actually one of the actual series, was a series of episodes dealt with missing and murdered Indigenous women, and it was accurately depicted. It was accurately shown, and I'm hoping that people out there that have seen that series are tuning into that, because that is a real problem, and it is just a situation where it's a litmus test. It's an actual. It's kind of like the George Floyd thing, where you go like, well, if that was a white guy, would they have just, like, stepped on his neck and choked him out, even though he was already like subdued? That question comes up. Well, the same thing with missing and murdered Indigenous women. You got a white girl in the suburbs that gets kidnapped. You got every law enforcement officer and every lawyer and every person looking for that girl for months on end until they solve the case. Not so much with an Indigenous woman. She gets kidnapped. She's missing. They put a little bit of time into it. Maybe the reservation will kind of look into it, but no federal agencies, no police force, nobody. They just look at it as a cold case. They go, eh. And I don't want to use any colloquialisms or any street language right now, but they just kind of say, it's just another blank. You know what I mean? And that's a real problem, both in the States and in Canada. So that's the thing that I'm working on. It's called 13 Dresses. It's going to be a big weekend of awareness. 13 dresses are going to be, red dresses are going to be up in trees around the Niagara Falls area there. And all of them are going to have like a little speaking kiosk. All of them will have a story to tell. And then we're doing this song, Missing, which you can bring it up on YouTube if you want right now. It's pretty heavy, but I just didn't want to, it's a heavy subject. So, you know, but it's called Missing. And it's Linda McKenzie is the writer, along with Jen Hewitt, who is a Native American lady friend of mine in Montana here. And we became friends a couple years ago, and I produced the song for them. I played all the instruments on it except for the acoustic guitar. And it's up, and she made a video on it. And it's up for a NAMI Video Award right now with the Native American Music Award. So I'm kind of proud of that.
If I played that, Facebook would mute it because it's, it's.
I don't know about that. I mean, I play it all the time and it never mutes, but
Yeah, but
that's okay. I mean, we don't have to go there. I mean, it's
I would like to, but
well, just look it out on your own if you want to tag it on. When you do the re-release.
Yeah.
Let me just the link. Just put the link. Just put the link. Say you want to see Kenny's and Linda McKenzie's video Missing. Put the link up.
Missing.
But it's on YouTube. It's called Missing. There'll be a Native American girl in blue, kind of like on the frame.
Okay, let's at least try and look at it. So.
Yeah, I don't think they mute it. It's just a rock tune. It's a really great rock tune. I mean, Linda sounds like Janis Joplin or somebody, or Becca, like Bonnie Bramlett singing it.
I don't know if I can. Maybe I would have to put it.
It's YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't come up with what I wrote.
Missing Linda McKenzie.
Oh, okay.
The writer. Yeah, Linda MC McKenzie with a K.
Missing.
Yeah, because there's a lot of songs called Missing.
Linda
McKenzie. Yeah. McKenzie or whatever, McKenzie.
Let's see. I'm sure this. Oh, here we go. Yeah.
It's actually on my YouTube channel too.
Oh, okay. Let's see. There's also. Yeah.
That's it. That's me playing the flute. Playing native flute.
Grandmother walks, grandmother prays, grandmother cries, a tear on the grave for her Salish daughter have Hootney in the land where the sun rises high. And the bitter blows goes as the elder cries, the eagle flies, her prayer up high, a tear for a daughter who should not die. She's a mother, a sister, someone's wife. Her hands were tied, her spirit broke, strangled at the hands of a stranger's rope. They found her body 3 states away in the corner of a cornfield. There she lay. She was just here a short time ago, but where she went they did not know. But somebody knows she's gone missing, and somebody knows why her red blood runs cold. And she's murdered and missing in a land called home. But where she went they did not know. But somebody knows she's gone missing, and somebody knows why her red blood runs cold. And she's murdered and missing in a land called home. Grandmother walks, grandmother prays, grandmother cries, a tear on the grave.
Wow. That is great.
Yeah, it's a big problem. So
Now, it's a big Now, is there, if you don't mind me asking, is there more Indigenous women who are attacked, or just more women who are not, discovered and helped and that?
well, it's both. I mean, hopefully you get attacked and somebody sees it, and then they are able to find the perp and solve the problem. But the problem is they get lured in to these situations. That's why I say the Yellowstone episode really depicts it. I mean, Kevin Costner did a great job really showing how the problems exist. They get lured in by a trusting person that they may have known most of their lives.
Mm.
And the next thing you know, they take them out in the woods and rape them and chop them up, bury them, burn them. They're gone, just like human refuse, and the reason why these perps are doing it is because they know the police are not really going to chase it very much. And that's the litmus test that shows the racial difference between law enforcement of what they really are concentrating on and what they aren't concentrating on, based upon societal mores, based upon the overall climate of just, I don't want to say that all law enforcement people are racist. I don't want to say that.
Right.
It's not
Right.
true. I have a lot of law enforcement people that are not. But there's something going on where law enforcement is not putting the time into investigating these cases. And why is that? And that's the question for the politicians and for the law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're basically touching on societal agreements, and societal agreements that we've all agreed to.
Well, the
And
way they
even
look at it is like, it usually happens in a reservation situation.
Yeah.
They usually say, look, you guys are a sovereign nation. You got your own police force. You got your own nation, basically. You guys figure it out,
Yeah.
because we're out of it. We're busy over here taking care of, little, Barbie over here in the suburbs, because that's more important and it's more newsworthy.
Yeah.
And politicians can build a career upon
Yeah.
solving a case like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh.
So anyway, That's up for NAMI, that video, and I thought she did a great job. That's just a homemade video.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
And did you
that's
say
Linda McKenzie.
were
We
you
actually
playing on
performed that
that?
song down here at the Flathead Native American Reservation and Kootenai and Salish Reservation last year, and we did it live at the Nations there, and it was great. It was well received, and that's why we decided to go ahead and enter it into this year's Native American Music Awards.
It's great. By the way, John March is here. Uh,
Ah,
yeah, I interviewed him as well. That was a
great
fun.
guitar player.
Yeah, he really is. Nice person too.
Yeah.
Um, I let's see. I also maybe we'll watch this in a while, but there's a live version of you and friends doing a live version of Jeff Beck.
Yeah, you can play that.
Yeah,
I mean, if you
Uh,
want, you got time.
yeah,
It's
I
probably
do.
about 6 or 7 minutes long.
I have time, but let's talk a little bit.
Okay.
I also, we haven't even touched really on your songwriting, and I know you've written a lot of songs or co-written a lot of songs.
Right.
Um, can you talk about that or?
Well, interesting that you said co-written right there, because almost all the success I had with songs that got placed were co-written. I'm trying to think of, I have some musical pieces that were placed as instrumental soundtracks for, motion picture and television and whatnot that I wrote by myself. But almost all of the songs that I got placed that did well, that made money, were co-written. So that's just something for the listeners out there to keep in mind, that if they're, if you're a person that can sit down and write a song all by yourself and really, really write a great song, more power to you. I had a hard time doing that. I usually had to collaborate. So if you're not having success, you might want to consider collaboration, because that's going to be the thing that's going to open up the possibilities of making the song reach a wider audience, perhaps. So that would be a
What
suggestion right off the bat that I'd make.
what are some of the more popular ones that people would know that you co-wrote?
Well, obviously on the Abracadabra album, I had 3 co-written songs. I had the first song on the album called Keeps Me Wondering Why, which actually got a lot of airplay because we didn't release a single. When the album got done in 1981, in the winter of 81, payola was really huge. And if you didn't pay cash to a program director or a promo guy, you didn't get on the air. And so Steve was approached by Capitol Records. I won't say who, but they said, we can't pay this because we'll get in trouble. But if you'll give $50,000 to this guy over here, you'll get on the radio. And he went like, I've never had to do that before. Screw that. I'm not going to pay that. And then went, okay. And the next thing we know, the album comes out with it a single, and it stiffs. But they did send the album to all the DJs, and the very first song on the album was Keeps Me Wondering Why, which I co-wrote with Gary Malaber, the drummer who was a co-producer on that album and played on a lot of Steve's hits. He was my songwriting partner at the time. We had been in a band together prior to that called Gerard McMahon and Kid Lightning, and we were writing for that project. So we collaborated with another guy by the name of John Massaro, and we had this 8-song demo that we put together. We were going for our own record deal at the time. And that's when Steve was looking for material, and he ended up taking our 8 songs,
Oh,
took all 8 of them for the
wow.
Abracadabra album. But he not only liked the songs, but he took the masters. So we just transferred our tapes to 24 track, took them over to
Oh,
Capitol. He kept building upon those tracks, and that became the album. So I was playing bass and guitar on those tracks. So that's how I sort of became both a bass and guitar player for Steve at the same time, which was interesting. But anyway, the first song on the album was Keeps Me Wondering Why. The DJ would put on the album. They go, well, here's a new Steve Miller record. And he put it on. And it was my song that I co-wrote with Gary. It was getting quite a bit of airplay. Real 80s kind of new wavy kind of stuff. Because remember, I told you my band Pieces got buried because we were Blue Eyed Soul. So what did I start writing? New wave 80s stuff, because I wanted to be hip and current. And what did Steve do? He appropriated our demo and took it for his signature. And as a matter of fact, if you read the Rolling Stone interview by Park Butterbaugh, he talks about how Malaber, Lewis, and Massaro, these 3 writers, MLM, gave Steve a new sound and a new face of music that he needed to come back.
wow.
So we actually kind of helped Steve come out of his little writing doldrums that he was in. So then the record actually comes out. It stiffs in the U.S. because Capitol wouldn't push it because we weren't putting money into payola. So fortunately, Steve had a deal in Europe with Polygram for Europe, and they got it, and they loved the album. And so they loved Abracadabra because it was kind of like nothing he'd ever done before. And they released it in Europe, kind of like a new artist. Like, who's this guy, Steve Miller, with Abracadabra? There were a bunch of young people, especially like in the Eastern Bloc and like behind the wall in Berlin and Russia and down in South America. I mean, all these young people liked this song. It was this pogo kind of reggae-ish ska kind of thing. And they just thought we were great, but they didn't know who the hell Steve Miller was. It was pretty funny. It just became a hit on its own, standalone. So fortunately, my song "Never Say No" was put as the B-side of the single in Europe.
Wow.
Thank you. You know, we're talking millions of sales. You know.
Wow.
And then they had to come out with a second single, and so they picked my song, a song called "Cool Magic." And if you go to my YouTube channel, Kenny Lee Lewis YouTube channel, I actually have a lesson on there on showing how we wrote and we layered and we recorded Cool Magic in the studio. And I actually do it live in real time. I use a drum machine because I don't have a live drummer there, but I build the whole song again in another key because I couldn't sing it in that higher key. But I do the whole thing, including the backwards guitar solo. I show how to do that in Pro Tools now. Because in those days, we used to have to flip the tape over and go on an opposite track. Nowadays, you just hit a button in Pro Tools, it just does it automatically. It's great.
Oh, wow.
So if people want to see that song being constructed, you go to my YouTube channel, Cool Magic. It's pretty funny. But anyway, so those three songs were, you know, pretty well known at that time and played all over Europe, played all over, you know, Scandinavia, London and whatnot. So then I wrote a song called "Why Can't I Fall in Love" with a guy named John Finley that Ivan Neville sang for us. And that went on the soundtrack for a movie called "Pump Up the Volume" with Christian Slater. This was in 1990. This was 8 years later.
Yeah.
And that got on a soundtrack album with Sonic Youth and, you know, Timbuktu Free and Bad Brains, Concrete Blonde, a bunch of different, you know, groups were on that soundtrack album. And that sold pretty good. And I wrote that song called "Why Can't I Fall in Love." It's kind of a blues kind of song. And we got Ivan Neville to sing it, and it turned out really good. He's the guy that's with Dubsta Funk, you know, and tours with Government Mule, and it's Aaron Neville's son, you know.
Okay.
From the Neville brothers.
Did you say John Finley?
Yeah, John Finley was in a band.
You mean, wait a minute, the John Finley,
the writer, singer, huh?
From Rhinoceros?
Yes, yes.
He's a friend of mine.
Well, there you go. I co-wrote it with him.
John
In fact,
Finley.
I'm going to see him when I'm doing this art park thing from this video you just played. I'm going to go up into Toronto. I'm going to go visit he and his
Oh
wife.
my God! You have to tell him, you know, that I interviewed
will.
you. I interviewed him too.
Oh,
I
great.
love him. He's
I do too. He's real
great.
soulful.
He's
Rhinoceros at one point was probably one of the hippest bands to ever come out of Toronto and out of Canada in general.
yeah.
And they were huge. I mean, they were playing up alongside, Hawkins and the band, and then Gary Malaber's band called Raven. They were from Buffalo. They were huge too. All those bands were playing around the same time in the early 70s.
Yeah. That's great. I love
So that's
that.
just a couple. And then, I played on a lot of soundtracks. I mean, I played on Rocky soundtrack, but that's just my bass playing. But I had songs in a movie called Protocol, songs in a movie called Spring Break, which had a big soundtrack to it. I had songs in a movie called Iron Eagle with Louis Gossett and Frank Macchio or Ralph Macchio. Ralph Macchio, yeah. You know, the Karate Kid.
Yeah.
It was an Air Force movie before Top Gun. And it had a song in there. So I mean, a bunch of different artists I've had over the years. And then of course my band Pieces, or record deal, if you go on YouTube, I wrote 2 songs that were on my debut album with Jeff Paris. And I had 2 songs that I sang lead on. That was the first time I ever sang lead vocals on a record, was that Pieces record. And those were, unfortunately, because the record kind of stiffed, we never really got in the air with that. But it got really big in Japan, which is funny.
See,
There's a
there
bunch
you
of
go.
Japanese people that love Pieces, which is funny.
That is really.
You've never gone there. Yeah, if you put in Pieces and put in Can't Turn Down Love.
Can't
Turn Down Love.
Down love.
And you
Good.
see it right there with the there it is. That's me singing and writing. If you want to fire it. This is my band Pieces. We were great.
Okay.
Me singing.
Hey girl, I'm really digging on you, baby. This love you bring is so new. And girl, do you know your love for me really shines? Must have been locked up in your heart all this time. You were wrong when you blamed yourself for the things that went wrong in the past. Those other guys just couldn't bring it out of you, baby. Now I see that you want us to last. I can't turn down love, a special kind, from deep within your soul. I can't turn down love, make me feel good, baby, down deep inside my own soul. Say, girl, I see the look in your eyes. I know what you're thinking. Don't try to hide, no. So, girl, if you have to learn to give yourself again, I can be patient. We got plenty of time to begin. You were wrong when you blamed yourself for the things that went wrong in the past. Those other guys couldn't bring it out of you, baby. Now I see that you want us to last. I can't turn down love, a special kind, from deep within your soul. I can't turn down love, make me feel good, baby, down deep inside my own soul. Oh, I'm the one who chases fantasy, but now I know your sweet love's good for me. Oh, I don't ever want to let you go. Now it's so easy to see. I can't turn down love, special kind, deep within your soul. I can't turn down love, make me feel good, baby, down deep inside my own soul. I can't turn down love, special kind, deep within your soul. I can't turn down love, make me feel good, baby, down deep inside my own soul. I can't turn down love, special kind.
Oh, it's quite the song.
Blue-eyed soul, baby.
Very nice. Great song.
Well, thanks. I mean, Jeff Lieb is all over that. He's playing synthesizers, piano, singing harmonies. You know, he helped me, kind of arrange the stack and everything, which is great. But yeah,
Really?
I mean, that record is incredible. I mean, people that listen to that record, they just go like, wow. But
Yeah.
it just never got heard because we were on a small label. We were on EMI Liberty, and it got bought out right when we were releasing the record by Capital EMI. And the guy that signed us, Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere and the Raiders, he gets fired as AR guy. And then we end up with Don Grierson at Capitol. He's like, I don't know anything about this record. When did you guys make this record? And it's like, Blue Eyed Soul's dead. Got anything like the Knack? So you spend your whole life trying to get a record deal. You finally get it. And it's just like they just kind of take it and go like, oh, that's cute. You just kind of throw it in the trash. Next,
God. Shit.
Yeah, I wrote that song for Diane.
Oh, really?
We were just becoming an item.
Oh. Hey, I want to show people also your these from this All Music, the credits, which
discography.
Yeah, well, this is your credits. This starts 1970 and then moves up.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff missing too, but that's a good start.
We should hear that jazz tune too. Yep.
Yeah. Some of my favorite records that I played on were like Billy Preston, played bass on that record. A Dave Mason record. I played on a Dusty Springfield song. That's pretty funny.
Wow.
I got to play with a lot of different people. Billy Burnett and I I was his bass player for a while. Before he got Fleetwood Mac, we did a couple records together. That was fun. Dwight Twilley, I used to play with him. Just all kinds of folks that were great. A lot of people don't know that I played almost all of, and there's a guy that fights me on this. He's a Beach Boy chronicler. He's the guy that controls all the masters over Capitol.
Yeah.
When we were over at Capitol in '82 working on the Abracadabra album, I got approached by a record executive there by the name of Zimmerman. What do I call him? Bob Zimmerman? Not Bob Zimmerman. Anyway, his name is Zimmerman.
Yeah.
He asked me, he says, you know what? We're going to re-release the whole Beach Boy catalog, but we can't find the masters. Because if you've heard stories before, a lot of times they took these masters, they used to either re-record over them or they just throw them out. They couldn't find, all they had was the mixes, the original mixes for the first original Beach Boy hits, Honda and Daddy Took the T-Bird Away and, Shut 'Em Down. All those songs.
Yeah.
And they said, we want to re-release the catalog, but we can't hear the bass. They were mixed for AM radio for cars and Brian's bass is so weak, we don't really have any low end to the track, and we want to re-release this catalog. He goes, can you come in and bring your old P bass that you have with the flat wound strings on it, that 64 P bass?
Yeah.
It looks just like Brian Wilson's. He goes, we'd love you to play his bass lines over the top of what he played, and we'll mix them in to the mix so we can re-release this for FM and for digital and all that shit. And I was like, okay. So I went in, I did a double scale session for a couple of days, and I just played bass on all these original Beach Boy hits.
Wow.
And they remastered them with that bass in there a little louder. And I try to tell people this, and then I get this guy, he goes, I know all those masters. There's no bass been re-recorded on that, blah, blah, blah. Look, I was there, man. I got the session. I got the double scale checks. I can show you the stubs for them, But in those days, they used to not want to say that anybody else other than the band was participating, which is crazy because later on, Brian finally said that hardly anybody in the Beach Boys played on those tracks.
Yeah.
It was a wrecking crew, as you know.
Right.
And I think you were involved in that movie, so And so it was just another situation where, just bring in a bass player and we'll have him fix the bass parts. It was kind of cool. So in a sense, I played on all the original Beach Boy hits, which is pretty funny. But of course, 25 years later.
That's wild. That's some wild stuff, man. Looking back.
About 20 years later. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really.
But anyway, I've had a great career, man. I both, like I told you earlier before we even started the interview, I play bass and guitar equally well.
Yeah.
And I have clients that hire me for one or the other. And sometimes I can't tell them that I play the other instrument because it kind of dilutes the whole mystique of what I'm doing on that instrument. And I used to have producers that were not really musicians so much. They were just sort of like contractors for movies, soundtrack, and commercials, blah, blah, blah. And they go, well, because I'd say to them, I'd say, I play the bass session, for instance. And at the end of the night, they go, we need to get a good guitar player in here and put a part player. I go, hey, I got my Strat in the car. I can put it on for you right now. And they go, you play guitar? I go, well, yeah, well, like, are you any good? I'm like going, well, yeah, why don't you just try me? And if you like it, pay me, and of course they always loved it, and it was like crazy. But then the guy would say maybe a couple of days later, we'd be on another session. He goes, are you really a bass player? I really need a real bass player. I don't need some guy that plays guitar, They get so confused about it, like, and then the same thing with guitar. I say I play bass, and I tell people, like, around Central Coast where I live now, to this day, hardly anybody ever hires me for bass, even though they see me all the time playing with Steve Miller, because around town I'm always playing guitar because I lead my own bands, and I feel better leading on guitar because then I can hire a bass player and I can kind of like talk and entertain and look at the audience and not play for a minute, while I'm in the middle of a song. But you can't do that on bass. On bass, you got to be on it every second. And in order for you to be a lead singer, bass player, it's very difficult. There's only a few guys that ever pull it off, like Phil Lynott of, Thin Lizzy, and Peter Cetera of Chicago. I'm trying to think of some others. There's not a lot, there's only a few guys. Night Ranger, that guy, Jack Blades. There's only a few. Sting, another guy. There's only a few bass players that were lead singers that played bass in their own bands. It's kind of a hard position to do.
Yeah.
Especially if you have anything that's sophisticated in terms of, a pattern or something. It's hard to sing smooth and overlay, because you as a jazz singer would know this. You want to like kind of lay your vocal over the rhythm section sometimes where it's not necessarily locked into the actual grid. It's got to kind of smear over it like a saxophone or something, and like very lyrical and very, you can't do that when you're going boom, 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 like a Tower of Power pattern or something. You can't do that. It's hard.
Probably a little easier for drummers, I would imagine. Like a great jazz drummer and singer is Dave Tull. See, he's great at both. But I would imagine that's a little easier because the drums, you're already used to doing different things with different appendages.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I just worked with a great drummer last week. His name is Tony Jones. He has a band called the Ho Dads in LA.
I know Tony. Yeah.
He can sing all that, American songbook stuff. He sounds like Frank, and
he's got a good voice.
And he's playing the drums too. And he's doing great, and it's like you just go like, wow, what a multi-talented dude.
He's good. He sings really good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny, because he gets in there, he's loading up all the gear, and him and John Hatton are putting all the stuff in, and bang, when downbeat hits, and they're in their tuxedos, you think you're in Vegas, like at a big show.
Yeah, they're so funny too. John Hatton, he's an old friend. Well, Tony is too, actually. That's man, that's funny.
Yeah, I just played with them at the Baccara in Santa Barbara last week.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we did a casual for some hospital, and we sounded like $1 million, and the client was totally happy. We had a great time.
I'm sure you guys sounded great
in tuxedos.
My friend Andrew says Jetty Lee of Rush played bass and sang too.
There you go. There's another one. Yeah. Is
it Jetty or Getty?
Getty.
Getty.
Yeah.
That figures I would mispronounce that.
Yeah. No, he's another one. It's it happens, but it's hard because for you got to figure out your vocal parts, because even with Steve, there's some challenging vocal things that I have to do while I'm playing the patterns.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the old rubbing your head and patting your belly at the same time, and rubbing your belly, pat the head, It's the same thing. You got to really get it together. You got to rehearse it. You got to practice it. It becomes more difficult than when you're just playing guitar.
But I noticed you
just hold it and you go like, well. You can do your riff and stuff. You don't have to worry about being in time with some pattern,
But you just did that very well.
Oh, thank you.
The patting and the rubbing. Is the jazz piece on YouTube?
Yeah. Now, if you can find it, I think you'd really dig this.
Yeah.
Go to YouTube and go to Um, I don't know if it would be up there. You can try it. It would be Kenny Lee Lewis, obviously. If I Only Had a Brain. It's the arrangement that Billy Peterson helped me with that is very beboppy. It's very cool. And if you don't have that one, I have another one.
You know, I think I have it.
Yeah,
I'll
Kenny Lee
I'll
Lewis.
show
If I
you.
Only Had a Brain. Get to the point. There it is. Wait a minute. There it is. Yep. Is that it? Brain? Yeah, the very top one. Play that. Turn it up. It's a jazz ballad.
Sounds great. Nice. That's beautiful.
Thanks. That's an arrangement that was done by a sightless fellow that used to play the hotels in San Francisco. I'm trying to remember his name. Got it written on the music that he gave me. But he came up with those changes. I said, "You got a chart for that?" He goes, "Yeah." So me and Billy just went in the studio and that's just me and Billy Peterson, the two of us. Oh, and Gordy's playing drums. We got Gordy. So these are all guys who were in the Steve Miller Band. So
Oh,
that's the other side of the Steve Miller Band guys, is that they play bebop.
oh,
So things haven't changed much, since the time of my father-in-law. It's the same thing. It's
yeah.
just that we don't make any money doing it. We just do it for fun.
Yeah, yeah. That sounded great. You know, that song is such a nice song too, and I think it's so appealing to people, you know.
Right. It originally was called "If I Only Had a Heart,"
Yeah,
but when they came up with the movie, they said, "Well, let's make the heart thing be the part of the iron."
yeah,
The heart was for the Tin Man, but the scarecrow was for the brain.
yeah,
So
yeah.
then it became "If I Only Had a Brain."
Wasn't that let's see. I just
Harold Arlen.
Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yip Harburg, that was a whole interesting history too. I watched a documentary on Yip. You know, he was blacklisted. I don't know, I don't think Harold Arlen was, but Yip was. And they, like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, they read into the lyrics that it was political. It's like, wow, man.
Okay.
Ye-
Wow.
Yeah, he didn't work for a number of years. I don't know how he existed, but maybe he'd
Well, it
saved
was
the
before
money.
the Un-American Committee, because that song would have been coming out in the 30s, which would have been, when the movie came out. So
Yeah.
they wrote it probably in mid 30s, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Apparently, Yip had a lot to do with the movie, much more than we know. Like he wrote the dialogue. He helped picking the artists in it, and wrote the music with Harold Arlen, and yeah,
And that was just for the songs. The underscoring was another guy, and a Norton Buffalo, who used to be our harmonica in the Steve Miller Band.
yeah.
His uncle was a guy named with an S, Stromberg or Strom something. He did all the underscoring
Oh,
for the movie.
wow,
He was very famous back then, and his mom was her brother.
wow.
I mean, his sister. Sorry, his mom was his sister.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
but he did all the underscoring for the movie.
interesting.
The Munchkin dance and all that stuff.
Which was very famous.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's been just about 2 hours, believe it or
Yeah.
not. And thank you so much. You're a great hang and interview. You know, it's really interesting. You have a whole bunch of stuff going on. I'm certainly glad to know about it, and I know those of you listening who have not been that familiar with Kenny are really interested in hearing about everything too. It was just really great.
Well, you've been wonderful too, and Cathy, you usually when I get interviewed like this, it's somebody who's more of like a fan, and
Yeah,
they're kind of like not musician, and
yeah,
they really don't have a very good idea of where to ask questions from.
yeah.
And you were just excellent, and plus you know all my friends.
I
Great.
know.
So this was really nice. I mean, it's nice to be with a contemporary and sharing my little cabin with you here in Montana.
Really nice. I wish you great writing there.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go buy your book.
Okay,
I'm,
it's in Kindle too. If you don't want to have the hard copy, it's
yeah,
available in Kindle. It's only like $4,
I'm going
but
to buy it
it's a
now.
big book. It's 460 pages, so
Oh
it's
my
a
gosh.
commitment. But the only critique I've had on the book is
Yeah.
that people were angry because it wasn't long enough.
Well, and therefore the trilogy.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm working on that, trying to get that thing sold there. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, go to my YouTube channel as well, Kenny Lee Lewis, and there's a whole bunch of video content there for people to look at.
Did you say
They'd
that
like
you
one
do
thing I'd like to mention is that I'm going down to Florida in August, and I'm going to do a True Fire teaching thing, as I mentioned to you earlier,
Yeah.
and that'll be up and running, and I'll be advertising that. But anybody who wants to take a lesson from me, it would help me out for you to sign up and take the lesson, because it'll make me
Yeah.
look good with True Fire.
That's
Maybe I can go back and
cool.
do more.
Is that limited time, or is it kind of?
No, it'll be in their files, and basically they'll advertise it a little bit, but it'll be my job to get it out there so people can come to it and
Yeah.
take this. But like I said, it's going to show how to play guitar with a bass line. So here's the bass line, here's the guitar line that goes with it, and then they interlock, and then this is where the dovetail comes in. So I think I'm going to call it dovetail, guitar bass interlacing, or I don't know. I have to come up with the title, but I
Yeah.
have to have that hook, because if it's a
Yeah.
good hook, people will come and do it. You know.
As we know.
But thanks for
Okay.
having me.
Thank you so much. It's really just sweet of you to be on, and I love your wife, and I love you too.
Yep. Diane's really something, and her family history. We'll be coming out with that documentary soon. Wow, that'll be incredible.
We're waiting. We're waiting, and I'm gonna order your book.
Just keep nagging her. Keep nagging her. Keep writing the memoirs, because she won't let me do it. She doesn't like the way I write. She wants to write it herself.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Well,
bye-bye.
you can leave now. I'm gonna tell people who else is coming on and stuff.
Okay.
All right. Have a great day, Kenny.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Kenny Lee Lewis, ladies and gentlemen. What a cool guy. Wow. That was a fun interview. Really fun. I knew when Diane suggested that I interview him that it was going to be good. So I just wanted to tell you who's on the live folks on this week. Tomorrow is Chuck Berghofer, who's a very longtime famous bass player, jazz bass player, but studio player. And one of his famous lines, like Kenny was talking about, sometimes you play a lick and everybody remembers it, right? Well, do you remember the old show Barney Miller? Bum, da da dun, da da dun. That was Chuck Berghofer. So, and he has other stuff that he's done too. But anyway, should be wonderful speaking with him. And then Wednesday, singer, a really beautiful singer, Gail Pettis from Seattle. She's really good, just beautiful, warm voice and swinging, and just really, really nice singer. Gary Brumberg introduced me to her originally, and so that's going to be that. And then for the archives this week, Thursday through Sunday, Abe Pearlstein, who has a radio show on the Central Coast, and Friday is Rosanna Vitro, a singer from New York. She's done a lot of cool stuff, including a remake of the Tower of Power, I'm Hip, which I love. And then Saturday, July 2nd, Dina DeRose, extremely talented jazz pianist and singer. She lives in Austria, and she's really good. And then Sunday, Kim Richmond, great sax player, especially great on the alto. And actually, I should mention that tonight, if you're in LA and you want to go hear some big bands, there's 3 big bands playing in a place called Art Share, which is in downtown LA, which is a really hip venue. This Art Share is there's a whole bunch of artist lofts in the building, and then on the bottom floor there's galleries and this one performance space that's really nice. There's good parking right across the street. So yeah. And then Kim is going to be on from like 9 to 10 with his big band, and he's a really interesting big band player. And then next week, July 4th, is an archive day because, it's July 4th. And Kate McGarry, wonderful jazz singer. Lenora Helm, another great singer, and Shauna Tucker, singer and cellist. So the three of them were on together. That was great. Tuesday, a man named Don Slaughter is on. He's over 90, and he played trumpet amongst other artists. He played for Nancy Wilson, and he's a real adorable guy, and he's got great stories. So that's Tuesday, July 5th. July 6th, Ron A. Martin, wonderful singer. And then actually Friday, I'm going to have a live person on, a great singer from out of town, Ziza Muftik. I don't know Ziza very well, but I know her music. It's really great. Can't remember where I found her. You know, I'm connected to some different websites like the Jazz Gallery and places like that, and the Soapbox, where I just performed in Brooklyn last week or a few weeks ago. And so I like to support them, and I like to find people who I don't know about. I mean, I know a million people, but there's so many millions of people I don't know about too. So it's really great. Anyway, I'm also going to start calling with probably with an organization called Invisible, and I'm going to start calling and writing letters to get people to put enough people into Congress who will make Roe versus Wade a federal law, something that the Supreme Court can't touch. And I encourage you guys to do something, even if it's whatever, a few hours a week, something like that, because it's pretty unbelievable what's happening right now. I'll just talk a little bit about it, and then I'll say goodbye to you. But you know, it's pretty science fiction. 1984. It's just, I mean, it can happen. Shit can happen. So if you want to do your part, now is a really good time to do your part. And that's all I will say. So, ladies and gentlemen, have a great day. I'm going to have a really nice day. And I'm going to start really educating myself on logic. That's what I'm going to start doing. I'll see you tomorrow maybe with Chuck Berghoff. Okay, thanks again to my wonderful guest, Kenny Lee Lewis. Bye.